So my name's Molly Brown, and I'm the Vice President of Energy Production at GenPro. GenPro lives in a little bit of a different space than a lot of the developers and installers around here. We're actually a kind of a mini energy service organization. So we have 3 divisions. We have an energy efficiency division that does a lot of work with municipalities and schools and government organizations. And then we have energy production division, which covers solar production, generators and backup power, and then we also have a distribution division. So we distribute a lot of products, especially solar modules, so if you want a good deal, come see me after the presentation. So we've been in the Nebraska market since about 2009. We started on the smaller scale renewable energy development, some small wind, some backup generators. But since then, we've grown a lot, and our solar division has grown a lot. And so this is just an example of some of the projects that we've done throughout Nebraska for this year. Last week, we turned on a 1 megawatt AC, 1.3 DC system. Dave always teases me because I talk in DC and he talks in AC. For Grand Island utilities. We've also done 2 phases of Fremont, the city of Fremont's community solar in Nebraska. We did a 3.91 megawatt track system, utility system for the city of Lexington. We are currently installing what is a really cool system in Atkinson, Nebraska, which is kind of up in the north in the middle. It's actually using TerraSmart ground screws because they decided to put this system on an old rubble pile. And so we had to get a really, really specific type of technology to even be able to put a system on that rubble pile, and they were digging up like Cabbage Patch dolls and cement blocks and all of this during that installation. And then we actually put a ATI tracker on top of that. So that was the first of its kind in the country where those 2 companies have worked together. So we were pretty excited about that. We're just starting the installation on the city of Schuyler. With Sol Systems, we were awarded the NPPD City of Scottsbluff project, which should be starting in March, we hope, right, Dave? And we're currently installing some well systems for City of Gordon, and we've done the wastewater treatment facility at Aurora and a bunch of other stuff. So what do we look for in a good project? Well, it's all about the numbers. So we want to make sure that a project isn't being done just for the good feels of being green and sustainable and all that. We want to make sure it's going to be financially viable for the city. And so there are a couple of things we look at for financial drivers. And each municipality is going to have a different financial driver that they look at. Sometimes it's the internal rate of return, which is your total return on the project life. Sometimes it's the levelized cost of energy. For the city of Fremont, the levelized cost of energy was very, very important. Those 2 things work in opposite directions. And so your internal rate of return is going to be higher if you finance a project in the long term. Your levelized cost of energy is going to be lower if you pay cash up front. And so it's really just looking at the drivers for every single project that we do and making sure that the returns and the money coming back to the city is the best for that location. And so we do a lot of the community solar programs, and it can be owned by the utility or a third party. We've done both types of community solar programs. It's a program where there's residential or commercial customers that can buy into that. And you can gain economies of scale. So this kind of it helps the utilities manage that concept of like, you know, you have 25 kW here, 25 kW here, 25 kW here. You can actually aggregate that all into one system. And so only about 25% of residential customers have a house that can actually have solar, and a lot of people just don't have the financial capital to be able to buy into solar. So by creating community solar programs, we can actually allow people who wouldn't normally be able to have renewables to have those. And the city of Fremont actually did a great thing where they got grant money for their phase 2 project, and all of that grant money is going for low-income people to be able to have renewables. So they're getting an automatic deduction on their bill, and Brian did a great thing with that money to be able to bring renewables to other people. So another thing that we also help communities do is develop community outreach plans. We just did a survey. We're based out of South Dakota, and we released a survey to one of our rural electrics. Within 24 hours, we had 200 responses, and 85% of those people were interested in a community solar program. So it just goes to show you how much people and customers really want to be able to adopt renewables. And through community solar programs, we can do that for everyone. And so what we typically look for in those outreach plans is, do you have an anchor client? Usually a university, K through 12 school, they're gonna have sustainability goals. Hospitals, they're gonna have sustainability goals. So how do we get all of those people within the community to buy into that one system so that everyone is coming together? So this is an example of one of our projects at Gothenburg, and they're actually starting their phase 2 as well. So what makes a great project for us? Site selection, and site selection, because that's going to make or break your economics. So you want to make sure that you have infrastructure. Do you have the right size voltage lines? Do you have a substation near you? And do you have load near you? And this can be really, really difficult in the state of Nebraska because there's so much ag in the middle of the state that some substations will have 5 megawatts of power on one day in the summer and then 100 kW of power in the winter. That's not going to be able to handle some of the needs that we have for solar power and wind power, but we don't want to add a lot of cost by having to build out infrastructure. And so it's really understanding how the grid ties in rural places and how solar can actually support the grid in rural places as well. We also like really flat land, which there's a lot of flat land in Nebraska, so we don't have problems with that usually. This is a City of Aurora wastewater treatment facility, so it was perfectly flat and beautiful. We like that one. We also look for surrounding activities. So this is an example where there was a compost factory and the city wanted to put a solar system by the compost factory. Well, that kind of creates a lot of dust, so your solar system's gonna get really, really, really dirty. And that's not good because your production is going to be lost. So this was the guy who worked there. That was his car. So we said, we might want to move that site a little bit further away from those activities. And this is another example of kind of what we look for if a city, someone who might be in the audience, gives us a couple tracts of land. So we don't like that one because there's a lot of trees. Trees are very expensive to remove, so we don't like that one because it's kind of small. We don't like that one because there were 0 power lines around there. This one is beautiful because there's a 34.5 line running right by it, and this one is beautiful because there's a 34.5 line running right by it. So those are just a few things that we look for when we're trying to site a project for a muni. And the stuff that we do is kind of on the smaller scale. It's usually about 500 kW to about 5 megawatts. And I think Anna and we're going to kick it off with a little bit more larger scale projects now as we go through this.